Be seated. How do we follow Jesus today? How do we follow in such a season that we live in? That's really the question that I have been holding this week as I've been reflecting and prayerfully sitting with this passage from Matthew. It's a familiar one to many Christians. It's the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount and the offering of what we commonly refer to as the Beatitudes, the Blessed R's. There's a particular thing about the Gospel of Matthew which is important. We see this teaching given in the Gospel of Matthew and in a different way in the Gospel of Luke. So in the Gospel of Matthew, it's known as the teaching gospel. And what Matthew has done as the writer of this particular gospel has pulled together all of Jesus' teachings that came from different conversations with his disciples along the road and in the synagogues and over meals, and has put all of that together into this long discourse, which we call the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus wasn't just sitting around saying all this stuff in one go. I think that would drive all of us insane, and our minds would explode to receive so much. This context is helpful for us, though, because it means that Matthew was very intentional in how he put Jesus' teachings together. Meaning that right now, as we're entering into it with these Beatitudes, that's intentional. It's our starting point on our journey with Christ. There's a couple other things that we need to know as we navigate this particular pericope. One is, it's important to note that Jesus, having seen the crowd, went up the mountain, and he gathered with his disciples. This is Jesus offering his teaching to those closest to him, to those who have made that commitment to walk with him in this earthly life. And we know that this is a particular teaching and that it's important because of how the gospel writer put this into the text. One is the writer of this gospel very much could have said, and Jesus sat down and said. But that's not what we have recorded saying. It says, and Jesus began and taught them, began to speak and taught them. The Greek word here, I won't go into too much of the linguistics, but the Greek word here that's actually being emphasized is referring to holy teaching. It's more than just having a conversation with a friend or a person next to you. The way in which this Greek word is translated into English, we lose its meaning, but it's really emphasizing that this is something to pay attention to really grasp hold of. It's important. The second indication we have about that is the fact that Jesus is sitting when he's teaching. So we know that Jesus taught a lot on the roads, and we know that he taught a lot in the synagogues. And the Jewish custom when one is given official teaching to your disciples was to sit. We have echoes of this in our history. There's a reason why all of our bishops, they have a chair, a seat at a cathedral. It's why we have a presider's chair in each of our churches. To sit is to invite one's disciples to come be at your feet. So again, the gospel writer is indicating to us that this is something that we are meant to draw near and take heart in. The final little linguistic piece I will give to help us navigate is the Greek word that we translate blessed are. Now, there is no word that we have in English that can accurately translate the Greek word that is used there. In order for us to have some semblance of the meaning, we have to plug in the word are, that article, blessed are. And what that sometimes makes us think in our interpretation and reading of this particular passage is it might lead us to think that our blessing comes later on. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs will be the kingdom of God. In the English translation is poor in that respect of it. It has us thinking that this is something that is to come. But in the original Aramaic, in which Jesus would have taught, The word that is being used here would have been more accurately translated as God's blessing is upon. This blessing isn't far off. This blessing is here and now and present and real. It's already happening. You may recall back in November, we were reading our Gospels from the First Nations translation, and they translate this a little bit better. And I just want to give you a couple of verses of that. When Creator Sets Free saw this great crowd, he went back up into the mountainside and sat down to teach the people. His followers came to him there, so he took a deep breath, opened his mouth, and began to share his wisdom with them and teach them how to see Creator's good road. Creator's blessing rests on the poor, the ones with broken spirits. The good road from above is theirs to walk. Jumping a little bit further ahead, Creator's blessing rests on the ones who hunger and thirst for wrongs to be made right again. They will eat and drink until they are full. And then again, a little further down, Creator's blessing rests on the ones who make peace. It will be said of them, they are the children of the Great Spirit. We hear it a little bit differently in that Creator's blessing rests upon. And with that background knowledge, let's dive in, shall we? I have been drawn to this first beatitude. Creator's Spirit, Creator's blessing rests upon those who are poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit. What are we being invited to learn here? Well, if you have ever experienced poverty in any imaginable way, you can resonate with this. You can understand a little bit of what that is. To live a daily life where you are constantly having to decide, are we going to put food on the table this week, or are we going to pay the electric and the water bill? Are we going to be able to put gas in the car this week, or do I buy the shoes for my child who need to go to school? Or perhaps it's us deciding which medication do I actually have the copay to offer this month. When we live in poverty, when we experience true lack in this world, it can break one's spirit. I can recall from my early life, when my mother was raising my sister and I, there were many moments where we had to make such decisions. And one of the phrases that my mom would often say in moments of frustration and just, I don't know how to make it through, she's like, I have to keep robbing Peter to pay Paul. Y'all know that phrase? And what occurs is when real poverty breaks us down, breaks down our spirit, we realize that there is nothing within our power to be able to change things. When we feel that there is no path forward, that we can't find our way out of this quagmire, we turn to the only source of hope and strength that we have, God. We plead with God, God, make a way where there is one. God, I can't make it through this dark moment or this challenging time. Lord, I have to trust in you. Jesus isn't blessing the fact that poverty exists. Jesus' teachings from this point on reveal that to be so. Jesus is all about providing for those who have without and caring for the poor and trying to uplift them. No, what Jesus is inviting us to pay attention to here is that the spirit of those who have experienced real challenge and poverty in this life have an understanding of how to live in relationship with me more so than those who are fooled by their own strength and their own ability. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus says, because they know how to rely upon God. And that is where we start as followers of Jesus. No matter how much money we have in our bank accounts, no matter where we've come from and experienced in life, the relationship to walk with God through Jesus' teaching starts by putting our life in God's hands, by leaning into God's strength, God's abilities. As we heard in the epistle, is not God's wisdom, is God's wisdom greater than humans' wisdom? And is not the strength of God greater than our own? Jesus invites his disciples to recall and to embrace the reality that to walk with him means to put our hands and our trust in God in all things. For it is only through God that we move through. The second beatitude that stuck with me this week is blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now again, Jesus isn't blessing hunger and thirst. So much of Jesus' teachings beyond this is about feeding those who have without and providing water, that living water that we all cry out for. So what is Jesus meaning here? Well, the term that we have here, righteousness, in our scriptural tradition is intricately and intimately tied to justice. This is why I really prefer this translation of that particular verse. Creator's blessing rests on the ones who hunger and thirst for the wrongs to be made right again. Jesus isn't talking just in reference to about abject hunger and thirst. He is speaking about the hunger and thirst that God's people have for justice, for a rightness in a world that is so not right. Have any of us ever experienced hunger or thirst in a real way? We refer and talk about it a lot in this congregation. We feed through our food ministries constantly. And while there is true, real hunger that is needed to be addressed here in this country, what we understand is hunger here is not the same in other nations, in other places. Certainly not what Jesus is referring to here. In Jesus' day and time, when he talks about those who are hungry and thirsty, he's referring to a day and time in which one's daily wage could barely provide that. This isn't a hunger that is, oh, I haven't eaten in a day and I can pick up a sandwich and I'll be okay. No, this is a hunger that is all-consuming. Jesus is referring to a thirst that has us so parched that we cannot think of anything else but receiving the sustenance that we need. It's the kind of hunger that pushes us that if someone offers us a slice of bread, we're going to reach for the whole loaf. And if someone offers us a glass of water, no, we're taking the whole pitcher and we're going to drink it down. We are hungry and thirsty. Jesus uses this language because so many of his disciples and those hearing at that time would understand that drive, that pressure to seek out that sustenance. And he says, those who hunger and thirst in that way for righteousness, for my justice in the world, to make the wrongs right, to repair what has been broken, to mend what has been wounded. That is what Jesus is inviting us to see. To walk with Jesus, to walk the way of love, is to have our entire being dedicated and focused on helping preserve the integrity and the dignity of creation and healing it. Sometimes I think, particularly with the past couple weeks that we've had, as we have seen violent escalation by ICE in Minneapolis and how it has been like that for many communities leading up to this point across the country. Have not so many of us felt cynical about the state of the world and dismayed? Have not our hearts been broken? Have we not been crying out, God, where is your justice? And it can feel as if we have lost hope in that. But Jesus here says God's blessing is upon us when we feel that way. God's blessing is upon us when we experience that and we cry out for that, because it changes and transforms our hearts to seek it out, to be those instruments, to go out to the world and say, hey, we do not separate families. Hey, it doesn't matter where you have come from or what you speak or who you love. You are a child of God and you are blessed, and all of our reality as a society ought to be built around that. In this beatitude, Jesus is inviting us to see that our dismay at the current state of the world is a blessing to us, because then we are motivated to move together to transform the world, to reveal the kingdom of heaven here in our midst. And this leads me to the final of the Beatitudes that I sat with. There are a lot, but I'm just sticking with 3 today. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be known as children of God. We hear a lot about peace in our world. We talk a lot about it in the church, and we hear about it out in our daily life. We got to manage the peace. We got to make sure we keep peace in the family, right? Notice, though, that Jesus isn't saying, blessed are the peace preservers, the peace maintainers. No. There's something to that we often associate peace with trying to just maintain niceness, but that's not peace. When we claim to be trying to maintain peace by being nice, when we make compromise with violence and oppression to keep things calm, when we avoid conversations with our families, truthful conversations that need to be had, challenging conversations that may hurt a little, when we push those aside in the name of peace, that's not peace. That's siding with oppression. No, what Jesus is referring to here is blessed are the peacemakers. Those who are willing to go into the middle of that chaos, into the middle of the messiness, and attempt to broker peace, to bring together people who have different understandings of the world, and to develop a true relationship there where each other's dignity can be seen. A peace that is made by showing up at protests, making our bodies be seen, our voices heard, so that those who are being oppressed and are on the receiving end of violence may actually know true peace in this world. To be peacemakers does not mean that our road will be peaceful. It will be very much not that. But when we walk it, when we dedicate our lives, as Jesus invites us to the work of repair, the work of redemption, the work of drawing together in relationship, we are enacting God's vision. We are actually enacting God's strength through us. Our mission statement as the church, to be an instrument of God's unconditional love. When we strive to make peace, not by silencing discontent, but by moving through it, we are known as God's children, and God's peace may be made known. I'm sure in your own life you've experienced this, whether it's coming to a peace with someone you were in an argument about, or peace with a family member that maybe has voted very differently than us. Perhaps it's coming to peace with different communities. Whatever it is, I firmly believe that you have been a peacemaker in your life. You would not be here otherwise. And in this particular moment, in this particular time in our nation, when we are afraid and fearful, and we may not know how we are meant to walk in this world, we are gifted the Beatitudes. To remember and to be strengthened and emboldened by a God whose strength is within us, a God's blessing who is already upon us, not far off in some distant future. God goes with us. God is in our midst now. And God lifts up those who have broken spirits and uses that to challenge the wisdom of this world, to prove that God's foolishness is greater than anything on this earth, so that we thirst and hunger for righteousness and justice in this world, so that this world doesn't just fall to the brokenness, but rather together as one body we can heal it together with God. To be courageous in making peace in a world that struggles with it. Our starting point in this season, in any season, is that utter trust and reliance upon God. So I have some homework for you all this week. In your bulletin insert, you have this reading with you in your blue insert. I want you to take it home. And I want you to flip it to the gospel page. And I want you to put it somewhere that you will see it every day. So that might be in your bathroom, on your mirror, or maybe on your nightstand. Maybe you put it in your car. Wherever you're going to have 2 or 3 minutes for yourself in the day. Maybe perhaps it's around the table at night over dinner. But I want you this week to read it every day and to let those words, those teachings rest on you. I wonder where God draws your attention. Perhaps it's to the Beatitudes I was drawn to. Perhaps it's to some of the others. But I wonder what God has to say to you in these Beatitudes. So that's your homework. And I have to admit, I wish I had a nice, pretty way to wrap up this sermon, but I don't. But what I will say, though, is when right now what we face in the world is being posed as political questions, they are not. We are being faced with moral questions. And this is a time for us to courageously lean into the God of love whom we follow. We have done it before, we are doing it now, and we will continue to do so. My prayer for you is that these Beatitudes bolster you, uplift you, remind you that God's blessing is on you now and always has been. And no matter what we face in the future, we go with God's love and blessing upon us, and we go as one body. Amen.